And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Sheila Seppi, Soul Exchange walk-in, international speaker, and founder of the Conscious Awakening Network. Her new book is called Walk-ins, Cosmology of the Soul, which we're going to talk about and more. Sheila, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you. And if you don't mind, let's first start with your definition of what a walk-in is and how you became one.
Absolutely. So a walk-in is when one soul leaves the body and another soul takes its place. And how I became one is I always tell everyone, if this had not happened to me, I'm not sure I would have believed it, because when this event occurred, I was a very sick person. I'd been diagnosed with bone cancer, brain tumors, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. I walked with a cane. I had the beginning stages of multiple sclerosis. I mean, my healing was in a downward spiral. I was starting to get very depressed, but I had 3 kids and also had a demanding job and a very dysfunctional marriage. And so I went to bed that way. And the next morning, it felt to me around 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm not sure, but it was as if someone reached down, grabbed me by the hair of the head, and pulled me bolt right up in bed. And then it was like lightning ran through my body. And the next thing I knew, I was in white space. Now, I don't know how long I was in this white space, but I do know for the first time in many years, I was out of pain. I was feeling this overwhelming sense of love just kind of pulsating through my body. Everything felt, I would call it etheric. Everything felt very etheric because there was no beginning or ending to me, and there was no beginning or ending to this space. It's as if we were one. But the next thing I knew, my peripheral vision started coming in and then my frontal vision. And I find myself sitting up in the bed. So, of course, the first thing I'm like, what the heck am I doing sitting up in bed? And then it was like, what just happened to me? So my background was in psychology. And I began to just kind of go through everything. Oh, I must have been dreaming. I must have this. I must have been that. But then I got out of bed. And when I put my feet on the floor, it was as if I had never felt carpet before. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then I'm walking through the bedroom and I catch a glimpse of my reflection. And I was totally mesmerized. I was looking at my hair and my teeth. And, it was as if I was looking at myself out of someone else's eyes. Again, the psychology starts coming forward, and it's like, well, this is not normal. What's happening to you? Within a second, all of a sudden, I started remembering universal truths, which honestly, I did not have the mental capacity to be able to hold on to in that second. But I have retained a lot of that information, which I do share. But so all of a sudden, this information was flooding through my body and all of these past life memories. Now, the important thing about that is I did not believe in past lives when I went to bed. I was in a very closed little Southern Baptist box. I liked it there. I had never read a metaphysical book, so I had absolutely no foundation for what was happening to me. And then I started remembering healing methods and modalities that I'd never even studied. So again, I'm starting to sit here and question my sanity. All of a sudden, I'm hearing voices. I'm seeing people walk around that are not there. And I start thinking to myself, I've had a psychotic break. I've had some type of a dissociative disorder also because I couldn't remember anything about my life. And I had obviously never heard of a walk-in. I'd never heard of anything other than a psychotic break, psychosis, schizophrenia. So I just started putting all of those labels on myself. And then as soon as I started sharing my experience with other people, they started validating that for me too. And it was one of those things, they started backing up. Needless to say, I lost all of my friends, many of my family members, because I really didn't remember them. I started drifting away, and things within 3 months had shifted so drastically in my life. My personality had totally changed. Everything that I ate, the food that I wore, my articulation level, the music I listened to had changed so radically that no one could hardly even recognize me. And I'm kind of like, well, what? Doesn't everybody remember what it's like for the soul to slip out of the body? Doesn't everybody remember what it's like to be on the other side, or to feel yourself coming into the body? I could hear certain music and it would just remind me of being on the other side. And so, again, as I started sharing that information with people, I started losing them, including within 3 months, I had left the dysfunctional marriage. And within another 3 months, I had moved to a different state, accepted another job. And at that time in 1999, Google was not as, popular as it is today. So I'm flipping through the back of a telephone directory trying to find out what services are available in this town that I'm going to be moving to with my children, when all of a sudden I saw a postcard sized ad in there for spiritual counseling. Well, that had my name all over it because I wanted answers as to what was happening to me. Even my mother had sat me down and said, "We need to have a talk." Well, I thought when she did that, it was going to be she had something, had an illness, because she had overcome cancer once. So all of a sudden, I'm like, oh no. But when she sat me down, she wanted me to go to a doctor because she thought I had the beginning stages of Alzheimer's, because I didn't remember people. Now, with my parents, I remembered my parents, but I had very few memories of my childhood and even up until the time that I walked in. With my children, I had select memories. I had like a few things about the pregnancy, a few birthdays. That was it. Everyone else, I was totally disassociated to. So when I went to see this psychiatrist, this psychologist rather, and I told her, I said, "Look, I think I'm having a psychotic break, and here's why. I think I must have had severe trauma in my life, and here's why. I think maybe I'm even schizophrenic because I'm seeing people, I'm hearing people, I'm doing things, I'm receiving these messages." And of course, I found out, no, you're clairvoyant, you're clairaudient, and you're clairsentient only after a period of time. So at first, she went through all of the checklist. And finally, one day she goes, "I have to tell you, I can't find any type of mental illness with you. However, have you ever heard the concept of a walk in?" I'm like, "A walk in? What are you talking about, a walk in?" And so she starts to explain about a walk in. Well, the more she explained, the angrier I got, because reality, my whole desire to go see her was to get a little blue pill that I could pop, and everything, my dysfunctional life would come back, because everything else, first off, being super healthy, my illnesses they had all gone away. How do you explain that? Seeing these people, how can I explain that other than some type of a mental illness? And so she began to talk to me about clairvoyance and clairaudience and clairsentience. And she began to talk to me about walk-ins, which I totally rejected. However, from the time I left her office and got to my vehicle, it just kind of landed with me and anchored in that, yes, you are a walk-in. You're looking for answers. You are a walk-in. Now, from that point on, it took, I would say, a good 5 to 10 years to not just anchor that concept and to wrap my brain around it, because you have to remember, when a new soul enters into the body, it's like entering a used car. And so I was getting all the cellular memories, I was getting all the behavioral aspects, I was inheriting all the illnesses, all the dysfunctions, and I had to clear that, because when I came in from a collective. I didn't come from a single planet. I didn't come from just a dimension. Actually, the collective and I were here working on the crystalline grid with the collective consciousness of humanity. And it was decided when the soul of this body cried out to be released that I would be the aspect to come in. Because there we can affect change through light codes, etc. But I came in as boots on the ground to be able to have one-on-one conversations and to affect individuals on a very personal level, as opposed to collective consciousness, because it takes a while for the light codes to come in, and that energy is always shifting and changing. So as I began to clear the behavior patterns, as I began to embrace the fact that, yeah, I guess I am a walk-in. Okay, it's all right to be clairvoyant and clairaudient, because all of a sudden I discovered that if I listened to these voices or to these individuals, who I then found out later was part of my spirit team, if I listened to them, they always led me in the perfect direction. And I didn't have to worry that I was making a wrong decision, because they seemed to be guiding me and opening doors that all I had to do was to step through. And even though I was going through this horrific divorce, everything was working out beautifully for me. And so during that transitionary period, I also discovered that not only was this psychologist phenomenal in providing the information for me, she also was of Hopi lineage. And she had actually been, because I was in Kentucky at the time, she actually had been sent there from Chief Dan Eva Hema with the Hopi to set up what's called women's circles to teach the white eyes the ways of the people. Now, we weren't taught the exact ins and outs of ceremony, but we were given the overall philosophy of things. And she invited me to join that because, first off, I'm new into the community, and there were all these other women that all of a sudden I had this instant family. Moving from a different state and feeling the way that I did, I didn't have that family support. So now all of a sudden my children had more aunties than actually they wanted. And so that was, that was great for both of us. But it was there that I began to learn about shamanism, and I began to learn about astral travel, and I began to learn about the shamanic journey. And once I began to travel into these other realms, I was really able to have some really great conversations with my collective members, and they began to teach me themselves. And one of the first questions I asked them is like, am I a body snatcher? Because I didn't know. There wasn't a lot of information about walk-ins at that time. And so they began to teach me that no, actually, I was not. The soul that walked out of this body had completed its mission. The illnesses had been set up as that catalyst to propel that soul out. But when we heard that soul cry out to be released, it was decided I would be the aspect to come in, because I could kind of pick up where that soul left off. Now, that soul did not have everything accomplished. And so I was able, and that's what happens when a walk-in enters the body. They have to take on the karmic agreements and everything that's already at play in that person's life. So it took me several years to clean up. During all of this time, I was still searching for another walk-in, and I had never met one. And then all of a sudden, probably in about 6 to 8 years ago, I went to a conference and I started meeting people who were actually talking about walk-ins. And so I decided that's when I wanted to write my book, Walk-ins, Cosmology of the Soul, because I would be able to share my story and the stories of other individuals who had had similar experiences to me. And I never found anyone who had similar experience to me. Everyone was very different, because I discovered there were many different types of walk-ins. And so from that point, once I launched that book, then my soul mission really began to unfold, because first off, the children were grown. I had cleared the majority of all of the behavioral patterns, and believe me, there's still some things that continue to come up. The healing of the body had taken place. And the good thing about that is when I entered the body, I was able to bring in certain aspects that were in alignment with the body that was already laid in the energetic system. So I could enter into a sick body without frying that neurology. But as I began to change that neurology, as the biology began to change, I could bring more and more of my soul aspects in. But because really, when I worked in Kentucky, I was also working in a congressionally funded program. That's not something I could go to work and talk to about with people. So once I began to find the languaging and discover who I was, and I could begin to implement that more and more in my lifetime, my soul purpose kicked in because I came here to be a way shower, like many, like you. You're being a way shower with all of the phenomenal stories that you're sharing with everyone. But because of my lack of knowledge, I still, up until this point, had not read any books about a walk-in, nothing metaphysical, because my collective wanted my knowing to be my knowing. And so what I began to discover were the universal truths that I came in with. Those began to unfold in my life. And I began to understand truly what a soul was. I began to understand about walk ins, star seeds, hybrids, all of the various aspects of what makes up the multidimensionality of this universe, the difference between dimensions and densities and timelines, and all of those things began to really anchor into me. So with the next book that has just been released, Cosmic Convergence: Journeys of Walk-in Starseeds and Hybrids, I was able to put some of that information in there. And I was able to expand upon the original definition of what I thought that walk-ins were, because I thought, there was like 5, 6, 7 different types. But over the last 24 years, I have discovered there is such diversity out there when it comes to walk-ins. And there's such diversity to star seeds and how they show up. Because a walk-in, just like your soul, has to come from somewhere. Okay? So where is it coming from? Well, it can come straight from source, for one thing. It can be an interdimensional experience that someone is having, and it comes from there. Or it can be a star seed where it comes directly from a constellation, a group of stars, a particular planet, and it begins to open up. And so as I began to talk more about walk-ins, I found out, oh gosh, walk-ins are star seeds, or walk-ins can actually come into a hybridized body. And so everything that had been spinning around in my mind years and years ago finally started landing. So I began to walk that out in third dimensional reality. And it reminded me of one of the teachings that my therapist, psychologist, spiritual leader ended up, she always said there's a difference from knowing the path and walking the path and becoming the path. So I had gone through all of those various phases, and then I started becoming the path and being able to anchor all of those energies and all of those teachings that I knew. And because earlier on, I didn't know exactly what it meant to be a way shower and that there were a lot of other way showers out there. I thought I had all of this work I had to do. And so I started studying all these healing modalities. I started having events and conferences. And the next thing you know, I have what's called the Conscious Awakening Network. Because when I realized that it wasn't me that had to do everything, but it could be a we through the unity consciousness, then I was like, oh, okay, now I know what they've meant all of these years. It's like, guys, why didn't you just tell me? Just give me a clue, instead of watching me work myself to death. So, with the Conscious Awakening Network, we have many, many channels of individuals who have their own programming, their own shows. And that to me is so exciting because someone might listen to what I have to share. And it's like, "Oh, okay, that's pretty cool. And okay, so she does holographic grid healing and she can see this and that, or, she can give me a galactic reading, but that's really not for me." But they can hear somebody else, and all of a sudden it clicks and they have an awakening or they have a deepening. And for me, that's kind of what this whole life is about, is getting people to wake up to the fact that they truly are a soul having this human experience and not a human with a soul.
Do you have any memories of what you were doing before you became a walk-in? Like the agreement you made and, like what you were doing with the collective?
I know that I do have memories of working with the collective, and I have the very first memory that I have of the collective is we were in the Andromedan system. And we were pure consciousness, kind of just hanging out, floating around in this observation mode. Because when a soul is no longer in a form, it begins to bring to it other soul aspects of itself, the multidimensional aspects. After it has the multidimensional aspects, the next thing is it starts to merge with like consciousnesses. And so we were in that beginning stages of merging with like consciousness. And we literally were at the very, very end of the Andromedan system. And from there, we were observing there was something coming into the Andromedan system. And through hypnotic regression, I was able to find out it was actually an AI intelligence that was coming in. But that's a story in of itself. But there was a craft that was there who was anticipating the arrival, and this pulsation went out. And as it pulsed out, it was almost like a netting that kind of encapsulated this being, and all of a sudden it started shrinking and getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so, as we're observing this over here, all of a sudden we start feeling this pull or this tug. And the next thing I know, we're moving into the Milky Way galaxy. We're moving into the Earth system itself. And we are beginning to merge with other beings of like consciousness that are working on the crystalline grid. Now, from my memories, what I remember, there was a lot of repair work. Now, this was back in the 80s, the early 80s, and we were there for the convergence and the concordance and how all of those energies aligned and how that they were feeding into the collective consciousness. But from the crystalline grid, the collective consciousness of humanity not only expands out and around, but it also goes up through the ionosphere and up around that crystalline grid. It's if the crystalline grid is here, the collective consciousness starts somewhere in here. Now, the importance of the collective consciousness is, as I said, it kind of surrounds above and below and around humanity. Now, why we were there repairing this, and we were there at the request of Gaia. I remember there was a cry came out from Gaia, and later I learned that Dolores Cannon talked about that as waves of volunteers. So we were like in that second wave of volunteers coming to the earth to assist. From this crystalline grid, the repair work that was being done was because there had been this piezoelectric field that had surrounded the grid, and it was, coming and compressing on the grid. Now, the reason that that was an issue is that's where there were codes coming in of lack. There were codes coming in of illness, of separation, and it was part of the false matrixing programming for this planet. And so that crystalline grid energy was being impregnated with that. And the crystalline grid energy also connects into the crystalline ley lines that run through the earth. Why is that important? Because humanity is cushioned right in between. So that collective consciousness was being impregnated with all this false matrixing programming. And as humanity, and it had been in place for eons. And so even though now it was not in place and the repair work could start, humanity's DNA had already received that information through eons of time. So it didn't matter that the piezoelectric field was down. Humanity's DNA had already, through generation after generation after generation, been imprinted with the false matrixing DNA. So by changing the collective consciousness, by clearing that crystalline grid, we were able to put in light codes. We were able to help people remember what it's like to connect to the true matrixing. And we were helped to put in codes of ascension and waking up. And that was very, very exciting for me. So when the soul of this body cried out to be released, I'm done. Anything that's left undone, I'll come back and do it at a later time. I'm out of here. It was decided instantaneously by the collective that I would be the aspect to come in. Now, when I say instantaneously, we're thinking of Earth time, linear time. But when you're on the other side, it's non-linear time. So there was an agreement struck with that soul that I would come in, that I would be the aspect to raise the children, that I would be the aspect to pick up some of the work this soul was to do. I would be the one to come in and clear the karma. I would be the one that would basically take over this life seamlessly. Well, it appears to be seamless, but everything shifted and changed. But I still got the job done. Okay. And so that soul was ready to leave. It had, it came here, it started out with the grandest of intentions. It had been Arcturian, and it just kind of got caught up. Life is sort of like a playground, and it sort of got off mission, and it said, okay, wait a minute, I need to start over. And that's exactly what it decided to do, and that's why it left the body. So when I came in from the collective, I came in bringing first, drip by drip, aspects of that, or of an Arcturian soul, so that I didn't fry the biology or the neurology of the body. And so over time, I was able to bring in more and more. Now, once I got here, all of that changed because I didn't carry those memories. Because all of a sudden now I have that veil of forgetfulness. But I do remember being part of the collective. I remember what it was like to be in that etheric form. I remember what it's like to be born. I remember what it's like to exit the body. And for everyone listening, I'm sure you guys all know by now there is no death. We are eternal beings. And there are processes. Some souls will go to rest and to heal. Some souls are like, wow, that was cool. I'm ready to go again. And so they start planning with their team. And the cool thing is, I was already part of my team. And so that planning with that soul, what I say was instantaneous, was not so instantaneous because there was a lot of pieces to the puzzle, because I had to agree and figure out, how am I going to work with this dysfunctional marriage? What's going to happen? How does that affect the children? If I don't come in and this soul leaves, how does that affect the children? And so in that state, it was like, the only way I can say is it's holographic, but just imagine a lot of television screens that are around, and you can see various scenarios that will or will not take place as a result of certain actions. That all goes into the birth planning process. So when I came here, my mission was very firm. How I was to handle that mission was very firm. Now, when you get here, you also have free will. And so I will go from point A to point B, but I might go a straight line. I might, do a little curly Q on my way there. I've also used an analogy of our life plan being like walking into the grocery store. You have to eat. What you choose from that grocery store to sustain yourself is your personal choices. And that's how the birth plan works, because you also have various choice points that are along the way. You also have various exit points that you can decide that you're also going to leave the body, or the soul decides to stay. And the soul of this body had chosen the time that I came in as the exit point that they wanted to go back to the other side.
Do you think that the ascension and or global shifts have started? And if so, how do we prepare for it?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I do. And I think honestly, all of that started back in 2012. I truly believe, from a human standpoint and verified by my collective, that during 2012, when all those massive frequencies washed across the planet, everyone everyone moved in to 4D consciousness. Okay. Now, we are in a third density planet, but we have various levels of consciousness. So, the 3D consciousness, which is mostly, it has still a lot of the warlike qualities, it has the materialism, those kinds of things. Everyone moved to 4D consciousness. Sometimes for some people, that served to propel them into a higher dimensional consciousness. And for other people, it did nothing, because they were not even ready to move into a 3D consciousness. So that's one thing. Since that time, more and more people have begun to spiritually awaken. The reason for that is during 2012, when we moved into 4D consciousness, that shifted the platform of the collective consciousness. And as everyone starts to do their own personal work, the light quotient within the collective consciousness raises. So, I've had meditations and journeys where I look down on the earth, and you can see the light quota that's held within the collective consciousness. You can see it looks like, for me, sometimes it's kind of like a flower of life. You see pods of consciousness locations. You see little dark areas where it seems like there's no light. There has to always be a little light there, but you can't really see it. When humanity's consciousness is able to absorb enough light consciousness, i.e., working on their own selves, releasing, forgiving, dropping into compassion, when that light quota raises, that's when an ascension will occur. And for me, the ascension will take everyone. Now, it's going to happen in various stages and levels. No one's ever left behind, because we're eternal beings. This is not a race. Okay. It's going to happen for everyone, but there's going to be so much light. There's going to be so many people holding this higher vibrational consciousness that, just like in 2012, everyone's going to start to shift, but it will be at different levels. Now, once that shift occurs, some people will no longer be in the 3D form. They'll no longer be in the third density form. They will have moved into the fourth density form. And right now, the third density is where the carbon life is. And then we move into the carbon silica life. And so that holds dimensions 4, 5, and 6. And so we begin to operate from that place. And it's kind of like others start to catch up. And eventually there will be another ascension. If people are listening to this, or anyone who is alive right now on this planet, they are here for a reason. Absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt. They're here for a reason. Whatever frequencies that they're holding are necessary for the advancement and the growth of our soul, because that's the only reason that we ever incarnate anywhere, is for the soul growth. And it comes in so many different forms. Some people look around and say, "Are you crazy? I'm looking at so and so on the television, and what they're speaking is so offensive to my soul." And it's like, well, then it's teaching you how you, first off, don't want to be, but drop into gratitude to that person, because they're carrying out a role on this planet that you don't have to. And instead of hating someone, drop into an understanding and a love and a gratitude. So even what we would call negative actions, negative people, they're here also showing and teaching and serving as teachers from a higher plane. Now, when we're in 3D form and we're looking around, so many times there's absolutely no way we would make the choices that we make when we're here. It'd be like, what are we thinking? However, when you elevate from above and you look down, yeah, you would make these choices and you would really put yourself in very uncomfortable situations, because even as you grow, the soul expands. A lot of people also have come here to the planet at this time because they have soul wounds that they have been carrying from other incarnations. And this is the lifetime that they choose that they're going to release that. And as they release that, more light quota comes in and they're able to elevate to higher consciousnesses as well. Now, our souls are always in this growth and expansion process.
You've also talked about star seeds and hybrids.
Mhm.
And I don't know if they're all different or you can actually be a walk-in and a star seed and a hybrid all at the same time. Can you kind of clear that up for me?
Yes, you can, and you can also be very separate. So the hybrids that I talk about in the book basically are of two kind. Well, all hybrids are with human genetics and extraterrestrial genetics. Those genetics that are here on Earth can come from interactions, direct interactions with an extraterrestrial, or a woman can be taken on a ship and implanted with an embryo, or during any phase of the pregnancy, can also have different genetics inputted into the body. Okay. But a hybrid, the ones that I'm speaking of, are ones that are here to bridge the gaps. Okay. So, also in the new book that I talk about, I share a story about the Anunnaki and how the genetic pool has been influenced. So, in a way, all of us have hybridized bodies. Now, a star seed can come from directly from a planet. And when that's what I'm talking about, when in the purest sense, when someone realizes they're a Palladian in a human body, or their soul came from X, Y, and Z. I do have to say, however, sometimes, yes, that's the case, that someone directly comes from Arcturius or Andromeda, or they're remembering a certain planetary system of the energy that they need to hold for this life, because we have certain star seeds that are here to hold certain types of energies. And because we are eternal beings, I can guarantee the majority of everyone listening has had multiple lifetimes in multiple star systems. But it may not be necessary for you to remember that. But if you do wake up and you remember a particular star system that you're from, there's a certain frequency then that begins to wake up in the body, and that you begin to put out into the collective field. And so, as a walk in can come from anywhere. They can come directly from source, they can come from an angelic realm. They can come from a planetary system. They can come from a collective like where I was. They can come from any variation of a dimensional space. But in my case, I did come from a collective that was already here in the Earth system. So I came into a human body. I do know walk ins who have come into a hybridized body specifically for them to be able to carry the vibrational frequency that their soul emits.
If a person discovers that they are either a star seed or a walk-in or a hybrid, is it difficult for them to live here on Earth?
I don't know. That's an individual question. It's hard for me sometimes because I can remember what it's like so clearly to be on the other side. I remember the feelings and the sensations. That's not something that can easily be emulated here on the earth plane. Through meditations and things, I can connect with that energy, I can anchor it in. Some star seeds will have a strong longing for home and not know where that is. When they wake up to the fact that they're a star seed, they may go outside and look at a particular constellation and say, ah, there's my home. You know, a lot of times people, even with hybrids, they will feel out of place. I definitely felt out of place. I felt out of place with my family and everything. But a starseed really can have a lot of emotion around, um, feeling that they don't belong. And they also have a mission that begins to yearn inside of them. And if they have originated from other star systems or dimensions, and they incarnate and they're anchoring in these higher frequencies, a lot of times the star seeds will really follow a path of service. They'll, really work to help humanity in the ascension process. And even with hybrids, a lot of times hybrids will end up having these strong yearnings because they're here to bridge the gap between humans and extraterrestrials. And that can show up in a lot of different ways. Maybe they decide they're going to be a talk show host. Maybe they decide they're going to work at Walmart because they can come in contact with a lot of people. Because remember, each of us emanate certain frequencies. And that's so important for all of us. All of us have walked into a room at some time and felt very uncomfortable, like, wonder what happened here. You can feel if someone's been arguing in a space and you walk into that. Well, that's the same way that a star seed and a hybrid will feel, only extremely heightened. And a lot of times they will have all types of different gifts that come through: the clairvoyance, the clairaudient, the clairsentience. They may be able to walk into a room and smell something that other people can't, or they walk into a room and all of a sudden they have this taste that starts to come in their mouth, and they're able to taste certain frequencies that are there. And so, yes, sometimes it can be difficult, and sometimes not. It just depends on the individual, and I think the mission that they specifically have to carry through.
Do you think the global shifts and the awakening is caused by the ETs or just influenced by them?
Well, I'll just be honest. I think we're all ETs. I think that, because we're not all of us are from here. Now, there are Earth seeds, that they come from all the four different worlds, as the Hopi talk about. And they started out as gaseous, and they may have lived in the Mu or the Lemurian times or the Atlantean times, etc. But, by and large, these are all influences that help us, no matter where we have come from. We internalize it into the human experience. And so if people are open to receive the extraterrestrial information, they may find themselves being extraterrestrial in nature. But I do believe that the extraterrestrials played a huge role in the settlement of the population of Earth, as well as in the recreation of the population of Earth, as well as in overseeing the population of Earth. And when you have a walk-in, a starseed, or a hybrid that wake up or come into a body, it's because that frequency is ready and now available to affect the collective consciousness.
I made a mistake in the beginning, and your new book is called Cosmic Convergence.
Oh, yes.
How did you come up with that title?
Well, I remembered what it was like to be on the other side. I remembered that being part of the collective consciousness, not just with my collective, but also of all those other individuals that were there working, seeking, desiring to be of service to humanity, working with all of the various energetics within the heavens to try to affect change, to try to take advantage, I should say, of like the concordance energy. Which frequencies do we need to send in at the time? It's just this beautiful merging that was taking place there. And then I look at the earth and it's like the same thing is happening now. We are having this convergence of everyone waking up and everyone bringing their piece of pie to the table. So the cosmic convergence is that waking up to the multidimensionality of who we truly are on that soul level.
What is the main takeaway someone should get from reading your book?
That we are multidimensional beings having this human experience, and that we are so much more than we have ever been told that we are. When we turn on the television, they're not saying, and we are multidimensional beings. And if you focus, here's how we can manifest higher frequencies. That's not what you're hearing. You're hearing death, destruction, war, everything that literally was being inputted in through that false matrixing information that's being corrected, by the way.
It would be fascinating if there was some sort of tele-evangelist, but this person would be telling everybody that you're multi-dimensional beings and talking about subjects like this.
That's what I feel that I am, I have to say. And that's what everyone says. Do you know that you sound like a cosmic minister? You're always telling us about the soul. And even in the book, I talk about that ascension process, because the reality of it is we are all individuated aspects of the prime source energy. And in the book, I do refer to it as, Mother, Father, God, prime source, creator energy, but the source energy. We are all already that. And we individuate, even the extraterrestrials who are our galactic family members are individuated aspects of source energy. Everything is part of the source energy. And the beautiful thing about that is we can, no matter how bad our day is, we can say, this is just a human experience. And over just like that, when we're on the other side, it's almost like we're blinking and we're back in our bodies. And it's like, whoo, how was that experience? Well, that was a rough one, let me tell you, but I'm going to go get back in the line because I want to do it all over again. Kind of like kids with a roller coaster ride, because we are eternal beings. This is such a planet of opportunities, dualistic nature. We can experience love, we can experience disappointment, we can experience hurt and pain. You don't have, what it is to be hurt and pain. That's one thing about being on the other side. I remembered, like, apples. One of the first things I wanted to do was eat an apple, because I remembered what it was like to be an apple. I remembered what it was like to be the seed of the apple growing into a tree, receiving its nutrients from the ground. I remembered what it felt like to have the branches come out with the leaves on the ends of the tree. I remembered what it was like for the apple to come to fruition and to fall to the ground. I remembered what it was like to hold it, to bite into it. I remembered what the apple felt like, as well as the sensation. But there's a difference from knowing it and actually being able to eat the apple. So this planet offers so many, beautiful experiences, that if people can look at these experiences for what they are, they're soul experiences. And that's it. That's the only reason we're here. Now, I don't mean to diminish the human condition. I don't mean to diminish the experiences, like we're having this experience talking to each other, because that's a real experience. But it's still all holographic. And it still is occurring within the mind of source. And we are playing out those individual aspects. It would be like us having the most phenomenal dream ever and being every character in our dream, which is what we know we are anyway. And so imagine that in the mind of source. So the takeaway from this book is that we are multidimensional beings having these human experiences. And if we can remember that, no matter how bad life gets or no matter how tough things seem to be, we can rise above that and look at it for what it is, because then we become desensitized to it. And we can look at it with clarity. We can take the emotion out and we can drop into the gratitude for the lesson that's being offered to us.
Earlier, you mentioned that there is a false matrix put over the earth, or I guess this realm. Who put that false matrix up?
Oh, that's a long story in and of itself. But, if we want to look at time as a straight line, We can choose to incarnate anywhere on this line. If this is the beginning of time and this is the ending of time, we may come in at certain points. So I can be here and here all at the same time because we're multidimensional. We have an oversoul that has all of these individual experiences that's occurring all at once. So there is such a thing then as time travel, because maybe one of my aspects wants to be on the earth, and another one might want to be on Lemuria. One may want to be on the Lemurian times. One may want to be at Sirius. One may want to be on Arcturus. So I can do all of these things at once. So that's why people think of time travel. There are individuals who, throughout the galaxy, have a not at the highest of agenda. They're more about control. They're more about the power realms. And what my memories tell me is that when the division of source, the polarity began to take place, which is one of the early movements of the source energy as it began to divide, there were those beings that said, I'm going to be in the light. Yeah, I'm going to go do this. Da, 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 da. There were also these beings that said, okay, I'll hang out in the dark. I'll take the darkness. I'll do this, that, and the other. I'm still source, so I've got that. But the deeper that they delved into the darkness, and not that the darkness is bad, the more a lot of these beings forgot that they were part of the source energy. And they began to think of themselves as gods. And all of the power that they had were within themselves. And they began to traverse throughout time because the more they thought this about themselves, the less power they actually had. And so if these beings who thought of themselves as these great godlike creatures began to lose their co-creative ability, what better way to gain that is to find individuals who believed that they could not do anything outside of themselves, that or they had to do everything outside themselves. They had to seek outside direction. They had to seek outside help. And so it's my belief that it's these beings of darkness, and they take many names on many different planets, and they take many names here on this planet. And so I don't know, I'm not going to name the names, but we all know who I'm talking about. And so it's these beings that actually traverse throughout the timelines and begin to set up these false matrixings, not just on this planet, but on other planetary systems as well. And what happened is from Saturn to the moon to the Earth, there was this piezoelectric beam that was set up. And the importance about this beam is it has the ability to compress, but yet at the same time to amplify energies. And so when it was tweaked with the frequencies, the lower vibrational frequencies of hate, disgust, fear, loathing, separation, illness, those began to imprint into the crystalline field. So the crystalline grid that has always been around the Earth started out as an organic matrix holding, and all the planets outside of Earth right now are in a 5D planetary vibration. But we were lowered because of this. Some people say, well, that was great. It was just part of the grand experiment. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But what it actually did was caused humanity to believe that they were separate from source and everything that goes along with it. And so that matrixing literally was that piezoelectric field that began to imprint into the crystalline grid structure, thus setting up a scenario of that energy coming down and the energy going within the earth, so that as humanity is cushioned in between, it could not escape those frequencies. And then those frequencies began to genetically imprint, because everything in our environment begins to genetically imprint. And so that is the memories that I brought through from my collective about the false matrix.
Sheila, if people want to find out more about your book, should they go to Amazon or your website?
Well, if they want to find out more about me and read more about my book, please visit my website, SheilaSeppi.com. But if you want to purchase it, definitely go to Amazon.
Is there anything else that you're working on that you want people to know about?
Oh my goodness. Yes, we are expanding the Conscious Awakening Network right now. It depends on where you're visiting from. When you go in to look at that, you may find the website, you might not, because we are upgrading and adding some tremendous experiences for people. So I would love for you to visit that. I would also let you know that I've already got another book percolating, and it's all about the soul and the matrixing of the soul. And so, when you write a book and you get to a certain spot, you're like, have to quit. I just can't keep tweaking this book. But as I've read through this book, and I really do love it, of the two books I've written, this is my favorite. And I also did it. I invited Barbara Lamb to be part of the book, and then she has provided 5 to 6 hypnotic regression sessions after the walk-in, starseed, and hybrid section of people who have waken up to the fact that they're having these types of experiences. And so that really added a different dimension. And then after the book came into print and I was reading, it's like, oh man, I should have put more about this and I should have put more about that. So I've already started taking notes. And so I always have different classes and courses. Just, check out my website again, SheilaSeppi.com.
If people have questions, are you open to answering them?
Oh, sure. And you can email me at Sheila@SheilaSeppi.com. I love people's questions.
Sheila, before we wrap it up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Ah, I know sometimes everything seems bleak, but realize this. Imagine you're holding a flashlight and you walk into a dark room and you turn that flashlight on, and all of that darkness begins to be illuminated. That's what's happening right now on the planet. Our light quota is raising and getting so high that we are shining our light out on the darkness of the planet. And we're finding that no longer it's acceptable. And the more light and the more love that we can send out, the higher that light quota is going to be. And so remember, you are multidimensional beings. And this lifetime is just a blip on the radar, and we are eternal.
Sheila, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Jeff. It was an honor to be here with you.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.